Good evening, listener. You have found Dark and Disturbed Tales. I am your Master of Ceremonies, Steve Taylor. Thank you for coming. In tonight's story, we meet a group of 4 local lads that live in a dried-up old town by the name of Dusty Creek. There's not much to do there to keep folks or kids occupied. That is, except marbles. Our 4 lads always seem to find themselves playing a game, anytime, anywhere. Sounds fun, right? But what if that game turns deadly? Stay tuned and find out. So without further ado, I present to you The Worms Crawl In by Gabriel Black, narrated by the Nightwatcher, featuring Jesse Cornett and the Ghost of 94.
Dusty Creek was a dried-up old town. It had been small since its inception, and smaller still since the draft had begun. You could run into everyone you knew within the space of one hot afternoon, and by God, you knew everyone. You knew friends, and you knew enemies, and from day to day it was hard to tell the difference. At least, this was the case with young Billy Monroe. Billy was a washed-out, pale-haired 11-year-old boy, the runt of the pack of the 4 local lads. The 4 boys, all roughly the same age, generally ended up playing together, not because of any particular fondness for each other, but rather that in a town of that size, beggars could not be choosers. Because of this, the line between play and being bullied was a vague and often unimportant concept. The boys usually merged together in the town square. There was nothing to draw them there other than convenience. No butcher, no baker, or candlestick maker. Just a grocery of dwindling stock and a lonely haberdashery, and some faded posters advertising the benefits of Victory Garden, a hopeless endeavor in Dusty Creek, and a woman declaring that we do it, equally hopeless, as there was nothing to do. They had passing phases of interest, generally led by the whims of one Caleb Jacobs, a medium-sized, freckle-faced boy who was the unspoken leader of the pack. 1 month, it was jacks. Another month, cards. Though this was quickly put to an end by the hen-like ladies passing by, convinced that the boys were playing that morality-corrupting game called poker. After that came pirates, followed by jungle adventures. These phases would always come on suddenly, only to snuff out just as quickly. All that is, except marbles. Who knows why marbles was a permanent fixture of the group? It simply was. A game could break out at any time and any place, so the boys always carried their leather sacks of marbles. They generally didn't play for keeps, as the boys wished to hold on to their own meager collections. Though Caleb could sometimes convince them to risk losing their cherished marbles with a rough and condescending tone. Billy Monroe was especially attached to his collection, or rather, to a single large shooting marble. It was a true prize, 2-color spiral snake marble, with twists of oxblood and pearly mint coiling just under the clear glass surface. It was miles above the others. Simple, single-colored agates and scavenged ball bearings. It was a hot afternoon, just like every afternoon when Caleb declared a game of marbles. With some browbeating, he was able to persuade the pack into playing the game for keeps this time. A playing circle was quickly scratched out into the dirt, and the boys were now carefully choosing which of their own marbles they might be willing to sacrifice. When Billy Monroe pulled his jewel of a marble out of a sack, he gave the marble a comically exaggerated kiss for good luck before nestling the treasure beside him in the sandy soil, well outside the bounds of the circle. Roy Jones, a broad, thick-lipped boy with hands the size of pan lids, sneered at him.
Why do you keep that old shooter even though you never use it? Doesn't make sense.
What are you talking about? I use it all the time.
You know what I mean. When we play for keeps. Like we're doing now.
Well, it's lucky. It's always been lucky. No sense in the world sending you some luck if you're only going to give it away right back.
I'm just saying it's not fair that you don't use that shooter when we play for keeps.
Now, how's that not fair? I'm not breaking any rules using a different shooter. We can use whatever shooter we want. Right, Caleb? Caleb nodded sagely, leading to a round of snickering.
Roy just wants it for himself. I don't think you'd risk that marble either if you had it, Roy.
That's bullcrap, and you know it. Who would want that fussy old marble anyway? It's just a stinking snake marble. Who wants those? No, what? I bet those aren't even snakes. You know what those colory bits look like to me? Worms. Wiggly, crawly, slimy worms. Do you love worms that much, Billy? Like your Gramps? I bet your Gramps loves worms. Come home covered in them from shoveling worm food all day. You just can't get enough of them.
Old Man Monroe, Billy's grandfather, was the local gravedigger, a long-faced old man who seemed more at ease among the silent dead than his neighbors. Why do you keep itching for this damn marble, then? I thought you hated worms. Or maybe you want to eat it? Can't forget that yummy sandwich? Does Roy want a widow snack?
Stop it!
Roy spat through his gritted teeth, yet even as he spoke, his insides spasmed. Roy's stomach couldn't help but roil at the memory, and the other boys laughed richly as he burned red from anger and embarrassment. Last spring, the group had chosen to bring lunch pails to school in order to play jacks during the midday break. Caleb had happily offered Roy half of his ham sandwich, knowing that the quickly bulking boy couldn't refuse a chance at rationed meat. Roy had eagerly chomped off a large, ravenous bite. But within one chew, Roy realized that he'd been bitterly deceived. As a slimy, earth-tasting paste gummed itself between his teeth, he dropped the sandwich, and his gaze fell down upon bits of worm that were crawling on his chest and stomach, and the sandwich contents writhing and wriggling where they lay at his feet. He had screamed so loudly that he attracted the attention of the entire square, from the busy shopkeeper to the hen-hatted ladies, and even to old man Monroe, shuffling about doing rare errands that required personal interaction. With some deep breaths and a careful swallow, Roy brought himself back to the present. The churning in his stomach morphed into a burning, hated fire.
Well, that marble didn't do your pa any good, did it? That lucky marble? I bet it's cursed. I bet your old Gramps hates himself for giving it to him.
It's not cursed. And it was lucky. At least Pa came back to be buried in one piece. That's more than you can say for your uncle. I bet he wasn't even blown up. I bet it's a lie that he ran off with some French floozy. Roy launched himself at Billy, punching him square in the jaw. It took a moment for Billy to recover, but he quickly hunched over and drove a shoulder into Roy's stomach, like some kind of crazed berserker. The movement forced a spat of bile up into Roy's mouth, and he gagged as he fell hard onto his rear. The rest of the boys burst out laughing.
Okay, settle down, guys,
said Caleb after he had his fill of the derisive mirth.
Roy, you shouldn't have said that about his marble. And Billy, you shouldn't have said that about his uncle. Truce, okay?
Billy toed the ground. Yeah, I guess.
Roy?
Whatever. Come on, guys. Let's get out of here.
As the rest of the pack shuffled away, Roy had managed to right himself. He brushed dirt off of his face with the back of his hand.
I'll kill you, Billy Monroe.
A week had passed, and another game of marbles had begun. All resentments over the argument seemed to have been erased and written over with other petty squabbles and name-calling. The pack was once more gathered in the square, squatting by a circle of iron railing meant to protect a scorched and weathered sapling inside of it. The railing was being used as a makeshift prison camp, a mighty fortress housing sun-bleached, clothes-pinned POWs. Their comrades had planned a rescue, but sadly, they all collapsed on the field of battle when Caleb demanded a game of marbles. Once more, another game for keeps. The boys reached for their leather sacks and emptied their contents into the dirt. Once more, Billy took the beautiful marble and gently placed it at his side, safe and sound. Bitterness that Roy thought he had forgotten bubbled up, and he grabbed the marble where it lay next to Billy.
You're gonna use it this time? Show us just how lucky it is.
Billy squealed and grabbed at Roy's wrist for the marble which held it aloft. When the side of Billy's fist planted itself into Roy's chest, Roy lost himself completely and shoved Billy hard. What happened next was an accident. A solid plant, perhaps accompanied with a thump on the head, then running off in tears. And that should have been the end of it. That was supposed to be the end of it anyway. But the luck of Billy's marble soured that day. In one stumbling step backward, Billy's foot landed on a cluster of marbles, sending him careening in a violent arc into his fall. Billy struck the iron tree guard and landed in a heap on his side. And the boys were all laughing and laughing, and their big huffs slowly turned into steady breathing. and began to slow down, and the laughter quieted. They began to wonder at Billy's stillness.
Billy, stop playing possum. You can get up now, Billy. Don't be such a baby.
The commentary hushed as they noticed a trickle of blood coming from his ear, and soon another streaming down his nose. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They could only watch as Billy lay lifeless. His skin, shirt, and collar, and even the soil around him became stained with red as blood leaked out of his body. The shopkeeper was the first adult to notice, as he had seen the fight and had stomped down to the square to break it up. Upon seeing the scene before him, he had begun to yell. A commotion soon started, with some people shouting about the need for a doctor, and others shaking their heads over the mysterious whims of the good Lord. As the adults crowded in, the boys were pushed away, as empty and dumb as the body crumpled on the ground. A brief inquiry had been held, and while Roy was subject to the stern looks and long-winded scolding of the town doctor, it had been decided that Billy had died by misadventure. 2 days later, the town gathered to see Billy off to his final resting place. Old Man Monroe was not rich, thus Billy's coffin was a simple pine wood box. The large nails splintered the wood around the place where they had been hammered in. Monroe sat next to it, a gentle hand resting against it protectively, as his neighbor's rusted old cart, used in place of a hearse, trundled down the dirt road to the graveyard. Men with their hats off, women daintily dabbing at the corners of their eyes with their handkerchiefs. Children were there as well, many of them bored or confused. Roy was standing next to Matthew, the weakest of the group now that Billy had passed.
I don't get why we need to stand here and watch. I mean, we already know he's dead. Why we need to look at his box?
It's respectful, I guess.
Mumbled Matthew, though he seemed unsure in the face of Roy's strong opinion. Roy suddenly grinned.
Hey, Matt. Look what I got.
Roy opened his clenched hand to reveal Billy's spiral snake marble. Matthew gasped.
Roy! You can't keep that.
What do you mean?
You should give it back to old man Monroe. It's important to him.
You're talking horse shit. It's not like he plays marbles. He's too busy messing around with worm food all day.
But it belongs to their family.
Not anymore, Matthew. I grabbed it fair and square.
Wait, did you take it when he died?
Sure. He wasn't going to use it anymore. What's the big deal? He was already dead. There wasn't anything we could do to help him.
I mean, sure, I guess, but still.
Are you gonna squeal on me?
No.
That's what I thought.
There was suddenly a commotion. The wheel of the old cart had hit a rock, and the rickety old thing broke. The coffin slipped from the suddenly tilted floor, causing a splintery dent at the head. Amid the panicked and concerned shouts of the adults, and as old man Monroe gazed helplessly into the crowd, Roy simply threw his head back and laughed, the marble twinkling in his hand. Some days had passed, and Roy found himself alone in his small attic room. Watery moonlight streamed through the window, and outside there was nothing to hear but the chittering of cicadas and the occasional mournful hoot of an owl. His mother would whip him if she knew that he hadn't gone to sleep yet, but she was visiting her sister in the next town over, and Roy simply couldn't stop admiring his ill-gotten treasure. He cradled it in his palms, feeling the slight chill of glass warm as it absorbed his heat. He held it in one hand, opening it flat so that the marble could roll gently over his skin. He held it between his fingers, letting the moonlight shine off of it, thrilling at each glow of the colorful snakes inside. Roy was dimly aware of the heavy flap of wings and the sudden lull in the cicadas, but his attention was soon grabbed when he heard a noise alien to his usual experience. It was a faint, metallic snick. What kind of sound could that be, he wondered. It seemed to have come from outside. He pressed his face against the window, the glass becoming damp under the steam of his nose. At first, he found nothing amiss, but then he saw something that made his heart drop. From his perch, he could see, or just make out, the flung open cellar doors. The old rusty chain, which usually kept the doors closed, flung carelessly aside. As Roy puzzled blankly over this oddity, he heard a sudden creak in the floorboards downstairs. His blood chilled, and for a long time he remained frozen. The steps continued, each tread sending a new shiver of panic up his spine. His hand had begun to hurt, and he realized that he was clutching the marble so hard that his nails had started to burrow into his hand. He stared at the marble in horror as a sudden realization came over him. The marble! It must be the marble. Billy had come back for it. How soon would it be before he ascended the stairs and crept into his room? All manner of folk tales and ghoulish myths flooded him. Within a few minutes, though, the tread ceased. Billy knew where his room was and would know where to look for him. Roy swallowed hard as he realized that he needed to make an escape. Roy winced at the creak of his door hinge, poking his head out carefully. He didn't see anything in the cramped hall, and he carefully walked down the stairs, counting 10 heartbeats before silently shifting one foot to the next step, a process which was becoming faster as his heart rate began to rise. There weren't any apparitions or ghostly moans. Maybe he could make it? He could go to the neighbor's house and say there was a snake. He reached the bottom of the stairs. Roy held his breath until it burned, attempting to guess at which floorboard would creak the least. He eventually screwed up his courage and pressed his toes forward, preparing for a whip crack to sound in his ears. Roy was puzzled when no betraying noise came, but then horrified when he realized why. Instead of hitting the bare wood he expected, Roy had stepped into a squish of soft ground. A freezing coil of terror slithered up his spine as he tried to identify what he had just stepped on. All manner of wild, nightmarish guesses sprang to his mind, but there was a patch of watery moonlight by an uncurtained window that revealed the truth. Soil. Once he realized what he had stepped in, it was followed by an overwhelming stench. Somehow fear had blocked it from him, but now was practically holding Roy's face into it. It was dead earth, a sickening combination of wet stone and rotting weeds. Roy's eyes roamed helplessly, and a pale wash of moonlight revealed the true horror. Trails of dank soil led all over the house. Chunks of it, skids of it, all of it reeking of the grave. Roy started to cry.
I'm sorry, Billy. Here, you can have your marble back. Is that what you want? It's yours. I'm sorry.
He held out the marble into the shadowy emptiness, cupped in his trembling hands, hot tears dripping down his cheeks. A dark, dirt-covered shadow rose over him. Roy gasped, burning and dry, just before a shovel bashed him over the head, stamping out his short, miserable life. Old Man Monroe trod quietly up the path to the graveyard. He was a strong man, and his burden was light on his shoulders. Soon he reached his goal. A yawning hole rimmed the damp earth. Monroe was used to the moonlight, and he had decided not to use his lantern. He gently slid down the side of the hole, gingerly placing his feet between the wall of wet earth and the pine wood box before removing the loosely nailed lid.
Here you go, Billy.
The old man slid the marvel into the grasp between Billy's stiff fingers, so that he appeared to be finally holding it close. To the old man, it seemed that a small, brief smile ghosted over Billy's lips before resuming their restful state. He carefully climbed out of the hole after gently placing the lid back on, then once more scattered dirt onto the coffin with somber serenity. He did not fill it up, however. There was yet one more thing to be done. He roughly tossed the bloody mass into the hole. It was Roy, his mouth agape, his brains spilling out of his broken skull. The old man reached into his pocket, ready to give another treasure. Worms. Worms were everywhere. He had spent hours plucking them from the damp earth, cooing at them with promises of a grand feast. He scattered them all over the entire length of Roy's body. Already they were wriggling and poking at the still warm flesh. One was slowly burrowing its way into the pink pulp at his scalp. As a final touch, the old man stuffed a handful of worms into Roy's open mouth. He spat upon the corpse, then cackled with a final departing message.
Enjoy your meal, Roy. Well now, there is a lesson here. You should never steal from the dead. No matter how pretty the trinket is, young Roy found out the hard way. I do hope you enjoyed The Worms Crawl In by Gabriel Black, featuring Jesse Cornett and the Ghost of 94. Well, friends, it is time for me to go. I hope you will join me next time for another dark and disturbed tale. I am your host, Steve Taylor. May the darkness embrace you.